I know you guys are pretty well used to me getting up here and telling you that I never know what I'm going to preach until it's time to preach. But I have, one, a problem with procrastination, and two, a problem with here lately, the Lord making me live a sermon before he'll allow me to preach it. A lot of the times we say, you better be careful what you say in the poll picture, you have to live it the next week. But here lately, he's been making me live it ahead of time so that I have a little bit of insider knowledge on how it's going to really go. Can somebody just say it with me today? Rest, refuel, return. Rest, refuel, return. That first R is one that I struggle with most of the time, and I really struggled with it this week. Do I have anybody in here who knows what it means to run themselves ragged? Do I have anybody who is a repeat offender of running yourself ragged? I'm the number one suspect right up here, because sometimes we get so busy thinking that we're doing something, we forget that we have to be filled up to do it. This week, I don't know what I did Monday, but I did something because I sure didn't sleep as much as I wanted to. Tuesday, we do the podcasts, and we spend about 5 hours recording 30 minutes. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's a good time of fellowship and getting to know each other better and just coming together in a way that we're not able to a lot of the times. But we left here around 11 o'clock, I think, and I got home and went to bed about 12:30 because I'm not somebody who could just lay down and sleep. I got to have a couple of YouTube videos out of the way. And then Wednesday and Thursday, we had Bible study. And Friday, I had a work dinner for a coworker who was retiring that I really didn't want to go to. Not because I don't like her, but because I really don't like people that much. And I really didn't want to go and sit with a bunch of people I don't know that well and eat dinner at Papa Vino's. I don't even like that well. But I thought to myself, this coworker's dear to me. And whenever I was new and I was quiet and I didn't quite know my place, she was there and she showed up for me and made a place for me. So I wanted her to show up for me. So it was up to me to show up at this one thing she asked me to do. Sometimes you have to go even when you don't want to because somebody means something to you or somebody's done something for you. And that's a whole nother sermon that I'm not going to give today about showing up because somebody showed up for you. But if anybody else has to preach later, you can use it if you want to. And then yesterday morning, we had a funeral here that we had to come and do. But every time I was blessed with what we were doing because I kept going and pushing. I don't know how to rest sometimes. And I think we all get into this place that we assign value to the work that we're producing. We think that it's worth something whenever we're doing something, and that's okay to find value in the work that you do, especially the work that you do in the kingdom. But the return of that is we think there's no value in the time that we're resting. Because if I'm worth something and I'm doing something worthwhile when I'm working, that means when I'm not, it's not worthy of the time that I spend on it, and that's not the case. And I want to tell you how I found out this isn't the case and why you need to rest, refuel, and return in 1 Kings, and it's a familiar passage. I'm going to read it through to you, and then I'm going to talk to you for a minute. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. All that Elijah had done is back in chapter 18, when if you know the account, not the story, he faced off with the prophets of Baal, a false god. And they had their little show off, my God's greater than your God, no, my God's greater than your God. And they burnt the offerings on the altar. Of course, we know Baal didn't deliver, but our God, Yahweh, did. So Elijah is coming off of this big win. He's just slain 500 prophets of Baal. He came out on top. And now somebody's running to tell an evil queen all that he had done and how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, So let the gods, little g, several of them, do to me, and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Sometimes you've been working real hard, You get to a point where a challenge is coming to face you, because whenever you work, there's going to be something that stands in your way. In the physical life, it could be a coworker that don't like you too well and they have something against you. But in the spiritual world, whenever you start to be effective against the kingdom, not that kingdom, there's an attack that's going to come. You don't attack something that isn't worth being scared of. You don't need an offense or a defense if you're not threatened. Keep that in mind. I had to tell somebody that this week. When you're under fire, remember the only reason that you're being attacked is because he's concerned about the effect that you're having on the plan that he has. And whenever you're in the fire, remember that you're only getting better in the process, because fire refines. Somebody needed to hear that today. So Elijah's coming off this wind, and now Jezebel's telling him, it's over for you, buddy. And in verse 3, that starts where he gets how we get sometimes. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die. God, this is just too hard for me. I don't know why on earth you put me in this job and you put that nasty lady in this job too, and I have to deal with her every single day. That ain't right. It's not for me. I don't know why you called me to read verses on Sunday morning, and then you're going to attack me on Monday morning whenever somebody comes against me and tempts me with something. I don't know why you're allowing this. I'm going to tell you. I said I was going to read it, but I just have to preach. I can't stop and go back. I will forget. Sometimes A-Train read Psalms 23 this morning, and I went through it in my study this week. And by this week, I mean last night after I got home from Costco. And it didn't say, you allow me to lie down in green pastures. It didn't say that you ask me to lie down in green pastures. It says you make me to lie down in green pastures. Sometimes the attack that comes is God's way of telling you that it's time for you to take a little rest. It's him making you take a moment and lie down and refuel yourself and rest yourself so you're ready to go. Because otherwise you get like Elijah and you say, God, this is too hard for me. You might as well just take me now because I don't want to keep doing it. He requested for himself that he might die and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. This is not a month's difference between his win on Mount Carmel and the place he is now. It only tells us that he went one day's journey into the wilderness from Beersheba. So at most we're looking at 2, maybe 3 days. I don't know about you, but whenever I have a win, I'm high on that for at least a week most of the time. A good sermon will keep me going till Thursday. But he's had just a couple of days, and here he is saying, it's not worth it anymore. And as he lay, he slept under a juniper tree. Behold, then an angel touched him and said unto him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baked on the coals and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink and laid him down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. And he arose, and he did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. See, Elijah got a lesson that I hope none of us have to learn the same way that he did. He got a lesson in what it means to rest, refuel, and return. Because sometimes you get to a place, and I'm going to tell you what the place is. He went to Beersheba in the wilderness, and I looked up I'm on a kick of looking up what these places are and what they mean, because it adds more. And what Beersheba is, it is the lowest point in our lives. The Old Testament boundaries for the promised land are often measured from Dan to Beersheba. Dan being the northernmost point and Beersheba being the southernmost. It's the farthest down you can go and still be in God's promise. Beersheba is. It also represents the place that we go to call on God and where we go to hear from him. It's mentioned a couple of other times in the Bible. In Genesis 20 and 21, Beersheba is the place that Abraham came with his wife whenever there was famine in Canaan. at his lowest and lied to the king and told him that his wife Sarah was his sister. He was not behaving as a man of God. This was the lowest point that he had in his life up until this point. But God said, anyways, regardless of this, I'm going to make sure that I give you back what I promised to you, because he sent the king a dream about Sarah's real husband, her real life. And then there was a treaty made between Abraham and the king with far more power that he'd lied to, that they would live together peacefully. And then back in Genesis 21 again, Hagar, the handmaiden to Sarah, who Abraham had a child that wasn't the child of the promise with, whenever she ran out of the camp, she came into the wilderness of Beersheba and found her water jug empty. She'd been going in the desert for a while now, and she set her son Ishmael aside, and she gave up hope, saying, I might as well just die right here. But whenever God saw that in her place, Beersheba, the lowest she'd been, he sent an angel to remind her that when you have me, there's hope. And while Ishmael may not be the promised child, I'm going to give you a promise along with it that he'll be a great nation too. And then Isaac and Jacob both returned to Beersheba because of a famine and found the wells empty, found them dry, filled with dirt. Somebody had come and taken them out. And that's where God appeared one more time to them to remind them of the promise they made to their father and the father before him, that he was going to make their people a great nation. And when they went back, the wells were filled with water again. Beersheba is where we find ourselves whenever everything's going wrong. We ran ourselves ragged a little bit too long, and we don't know what we're going to do next. And God shows up and says, I've got this handled. Sometimes we want to keep our hands on something too long, that we're not allowing God to move in the way that he needs to move. So he brings us to Beersheba to bring us so we can call on him. If you got a problem and you're waiting until you're ready to die to call on God, that's your real problem. What you're going through isn't the problem. But that's just like him, to bring us back to verse number 5, when Elijah laid under a juniper tree. A juniper tree represents protection, purification, and perseverance. It's thorny, and it grows in the worst of conditions. So in the time that Elijah thought he was going to give up in the desert, really he was going to lay underneath God's protection and the perseverance of his life. He didn't realize it in the moment, but that juniper tree was God telling him that even whenever you're down, I've got you covered, because I've got you some shade in the desert. I'm going to protect you from your enemies, and you're going to persevere, and I'm going to purify your mind for it. And then the angel came and he told him, you need to eat something. You need to eat something too, physically. But whenever I'm telling you to refuel, I'm not saying go to McDonald's and have a couple of double cheeseburgers. I'm telling you that Elijah had some bread, and over in John 6:35, Jesus tells us that he's the bread of life. Sometimes you need a little bit of spiritual food, a little bit of spiritual refuelment. And he had a little bit of water and a cruse, and over in John 4, Jesus tells the woman of the well that I am the living water. And if you drink of me, you'll thirst no more. Sometimes you need to be put in a place where you can rest and you can take a minute to refuel, but you're not going to get to stay there. I hate to have to tell you that when God says rest, he doesn't mean stop. He means take a break, because after Elijah got up in verse number 8, he went on his next journey. He arose and he did eat and drink and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, or Mount Sinai, to the same place, the Mount of God. That's only a 10-day journey. Whenever you get up from refueling and resting, God's not going to push you farther or faster than you need to go. Elijah took 40 days to get where he needed to go, and it was really only a 10-day journey. So you don't have to keep pushing forward whenever you're not ready to move that fast. God's timing don't work like your time. You might wish it did sometimes whenever you want something, but there's going to be a time where you just need to take it a little bit slower. But Elijah didn't get to stay underneath the juniper tree. He had to get up and keep moving and return to the calling that God had for him, because then he goes on to Horeb and he goes into a cave and he says, God, you're not in the winds, you're not in the fire, you're not in the water, but you're a still small voice who even in the time when I was low, you can still speak to me when I come out. And then God said, you know what? You ran yourself ragged too long. You need a little bit of help. And it goes on into chapter 19 and the calling of Elisha, his helper. Whenever you rest, you don't stop. You keep going and trust God to provide the assistance that you need. Say it one more time because you have to remember this. Rest, refuel, return. Rest, refuel, return. When you find yourself in a place where you don't know if you can keep going, rest. Take a minute. Refuel, fill yourself back up. And don't stay there. Return to what God has called you to do, and return unto listening, and return unto moving forward. Elijah very well could have stayed under the juniper tree, and maybe he would have been sustained there. Maybe he would have died there. We don't know. But he did what he was called to do. Rest, refuel, and return.